Hello and welcome to the Golden Wheel Tavern. It's so good to see you all again today. It warms my heart truly, deeply. Now, before we begin, I do have to apologize. Today's episode will be lacking sass, will be lacking excitement, will be lacking, let's be honest here, a whole lot of cuteness. The bartender isn't here today. There was an incident. They're on the mend, it'll be fine, but this episode, maybe next, will be lacking them. So, if they're a key pivotal part of your enjoyment, I'm sorry that they will be missing today. Of course, if you want to support us through this, we're not using this as, a thing to get support, but, if you want to show your support for the podcast, the best thing you can do right now is go to social medias and share and promote and try to get the word out there, tell other people to tune in, so on and so forth. Word of mouth, telling friends, that kind of stuff will help us more than anything else you do. Seriously, right now, growth is more important than financial support in any way. That's why I'm not even going to mention the financial channels. Just push us out on social media. That's all that matters. If you want to support us financially, just go listen to the previous episodes. We tell you how to help us financially, including going and donating to trustworthy sources. Go and do that to go and get the exclusive cut. Otherwise, you'll get almost all the content, at least for this episode, just by listening and spreading the word. That's really what matters to us the most, and we really appreciate it. Now, since the bartender is gone today, we don't have a bartender's brew. Do you want to know what I'm drinking during this? I have Beldevon sparkling water, strawberry flavored from Aldi's. So, I guess drink that. Maybe next time I do one of these, I'll actually have a drink. I do have one in mind that I want to mix up, but, next time I do one of these, if I do one of these again. Speaking of these, what we're doing today is not a Taverns Talking topic, but a Taverns TTRPG session. You see, we're going to be playing a little solo TTRPG today. One that we picked up in the bundle we talk about occasionally. This one is called Bloodless. It's a vampire survival solo RPG. That's its little tagline thing. Probably similar to 1,000 Year Vampire. It says it's based on Vampire the Masquerade, a specific actual play called LA by Night of Vampire the Masquerade, and What We Do in the Shadows. It works on the Caltrop core system, so it's pretty simple. It's just a little journaling type solo TTRPG, and we're going to be doing a session of that today. Just for fun, nothing major, nothing too heavy. We're just gonna go through it and play as a vampire who is at the end of their wits, trying to make it to the end of the night before they are killed. Quote, in this game you play as a vampire at their limit. Your goal is to make it back to a safe place where you can recover. That could be a hidden sanctuary that only you know about, or in the company of trusted allies. You don't have much time to get there, however. The sun will rise soon and burn away any vampire out in the open. So you're trying to make your way to safety, and there's not many places you could go. This is one of those systems that, even though you are solo journaling, you do have to roll dice and keep track of things. So that's why I have my current notes-taking app open. So you will hear the clickety-clack of my keyboard as we go through this little solo TTRPG. So, who am I? What is my name? What am I known for? Why was I out in the night? What was I doing the night before this one? How did I end up on the brink of death? What is my goal and who can help me? Then there are 3 stats, but we'll go through the names first. The things first. Name. This vampire's name is going to be, let's go with Simon Beldevon. I am known for infiltration, being particularly keen on reconnaissance, if I can spell correctly, and other information gathering. What I was doing on the night before this one, I was breaking into a church's crypt for old journals and records. How did I end up on the brink of death? So, this TTRPG does have examples on pages 9 and 10. Once again, this is called Bloodless. You can pick it up on itch.io. Okay, yeah. So, some of the examples they give are like an unknown vampire has been hunting in someone else's territory and you were asked to stop them. They turned out to be a bigger challenge than you expected. Last night you picked a fight with a werewolf and won. Tonight they came back with their pack to settle the score. So it's a lot of you did something and it went poorly. Okay. For journals and records, I was caught by some of the clergy who were able to harm me with holy water before I was able to flee entirely. So I broke into a church's crypt for old journals and records. I was caught by some of the clergy who were able to harm me with holy water before I was able to flee entirely. So now I am, we're gonna say badly burned, still burning, and partly blinded, we'll say. Okay. My goal. Where would my safe house be? Where would Simon Beldevon's safe house be? Ooh, okay. We're gonna go with that I live with an old scholar who accepts rare and precious tomes as payment for safekeeping. Essentially, I pay him in tomes, and he keeps me safe and well fed. It's unclear who actually has more power in this relationship. I'm playing Simon Beldevon, whose expertise is infiltration, reconnaissance, information gathering. I was caught breaking into a church's crypt to gather old journals and records, and the clergy were able to harm me with holy water before I was able to flee the scene entirely, so I'm badly burned, in fact still burning, and I'm partly blinded. I live with an old scholar who accepts rare and precious tomes as payment for safekeeping, so as long as I can get back to him with these documents, I can be safe and possibly live through the night. Now I need to assign my stats. So there are 3 stats in this game. Essentially, you have a 1d4, you have 1d4, 2d4, 3d4, so 1, 2, 3. And you can assign them to each of your stats. You have ferocity, cunning, and influence. So strength, brains, charisma. You'll determine your stats. You have 3 stats that represent your abilities and have a pool of d4s to assign them. Having a higher number of d4s increases your chance. Okay, so obviously ferocity 1. I think this is pretty clear what it's going to be. Cunning 3, influence 2. That's pretty obvious. Then the game is broken up into 6 rounds that each represent an hour of time because there are 6 hours till sunrise. It's essentially midnight. During each round, you'll encounter an obstacle that you must resolve before continuing as described in the event table. In order to resolve an event, use the stat. So you roll d4s, then compare the number to the table. There is a table. It goes absolute failure, partial success, absolute success. Most of the results will cause you to lose 1d4 in the chosen stat, but you cannot have less than 1d4. While playing the game, use these results to help build a narrative for your character. Each success or failure can tie to the next event. Absolute failure we'll circle back to. And as you go throughout, you will gather blood tokens. Blood tokens are a currency you can use to survive the night. You start the game with 0. You gain more as you progress. Once per round, you can spend a blood token to add an additional 1d4 to your next roll. And at the end of the game, the number of blood tokens you've acquired are added to one last roll and used to resolve the final event. The final event essentially telling you at the end of the night how things turn out, because you won't die during the night, but at the end of the night, you roll to describe how the night ends, and you can possibly fail and die there. And then there are events, which is a table that you roll on. You roll 2d20 and pick one and go from there. So, seems pretty straightforward. So, we'll go ahead and start from the top, now that I've given you a brief rundown of this game. Simon Beldevon, a rather young vampire in regards to his appearance, a bit old-fashioned, seeing as he was turned a while ago, appears late 20s, early 30s, bookish, slim, sharp bone structure, handsome, attractive, as most vampires are, just for the sake of being easier to lure prey that way. His specialty is infiltration. Loving to break into things, Simon Beldevon is not one to shy away from possibly getting into trouble, but being smart enough to get their way out. Unfortunately, on this particular night, he broke into a church's crypt for old journals and records and was caught by some of the clergy. They, living in a world where vampires existed, were prepared for such things in their crypt. Particularly, they had gone down there with holy water to make sure none of the bodies had started wandering around again and hollow the area. So, of course, they had holy water on them, and Simon Beldevon, being smart and influential, is not strong and therefore was badly burned in the fight. Fleeing, he made it out, but not before being partly blinded and badly burned. And so now, he tries to find his way home. So, midnight. What we got? 12 and a 9. You roll 2d20 and pick your results. I find a mortal walking alone at night. I'm going to pick that. Simon Beldevon, upon fleeing, sees an old man walking down the street. It is rare for someone to be walking down the street at this time of night. Usually that means it's another night walker, shadow lurker, vampire. Simon has heard all the different names for such creatures. But this old man, he's not one of those. Simon's smart enough to tell. Simon can tell that this old man is just walking somewhere. He's going somewhere. Maybe an old man is exactly what Simon needs, because Simon right now needs someone who can't fight him off. Simon approaches the man. It's like, "Excuse me, sir. Can you help me out, please? As you can see, I'm injured in a way. Now, don't worry about me. This has been around for a while, but it makes it a bit difficult to navigate. So if you could just help me walk over there real quick. Just walk with me for a bit to make sure I don't wander too far off my path. I'd very much appreciate it." Of course, what Simon is trying to do here is lure this old man into an alleyway or some sort of hidden place where he could get away with this sort of thing. Get away with getting a little bit of blood. And we'll roll 2d4, as that is Simon Beldevon's influence stat, and we'll see what we get. There's a 4 and a 2, which is a set, or 2 and a 4, which is a 6, which grants me, the highest number rolled is your result. 2 and a 4, which means I rolled a 4. Which means I get an absolute success, I get what I want and more, and gain a blood token. So Simon beckons this old man to follow him. The old man, being chivalrous and old-fashioned, helps Simon along his way. Eventually, Simon turns into an alleyway, and the old man, being foolish, follows him. Only Simon leaves that alleyway. I do need to make a note of how much blood Simon has. Simon now has 1 blood. Hooray for me. Now that Simon has killed somebody and drank their blood, they feel much better about their day. And we can move on to 1 a.m. $19 or $6. Someone offers Simon a deal. Simon, still wandering along, hurt but feeling slightly better, is gestured into shadow by a tall, lanky, lithe figure. Simon's smart enough to recognize what this is. This is some sort of fae beckoning him, and Simon's smart enough to know it's a bad idea to turn down a fae. So Simon steps into this shadowy outcropping where there's a strange figure, tall, lithe, spindly, difficult to make out the shape in the shadow, even for a vampire. This figure reaches out its 2 hands. In one hand, a beating heart. In the other hand, a crystal. Simon isn't quite sure what the Fae folk is asking for, or what the Fae folk wants, but Simon knows that he can't get away from this without taking one of the 2 items. And so, Simon snatches the beating heart out of the Fae folk's hand, thinking to his readings and assuming that he has read enough about Fae folk to know that choosing the beating heart is better than choosing the gleaming crystal. He's hoping to use his cunning here to outsmart this Fae folk and know what the Fae folk wants and get the best of it, or at least the best he can get from it. So I'm going to roll 3d4. That was not good. That was a 1, a 2, and a 2, meaning I get a 2, which is a partial failure. I don't get what I want, and my cunning reduces by 1. Beating heart or crystal. Suddenly, Simon hears yelling and shouting from a nearby alleyway, particularly the alleyway that Simon left that old man in. That old man's no longer dead. It seems the beating heart revived the last person Simon killed, and now the old man is both asking for help and seeking revenge. Simon has to make a quick escape out of here. Hopefully, they can make it back to where they're going to. 2 a.m. Roll the 2d20. It is a 12 or a 3. Ooh. Okay, so we're going to go with number 3. A mortal has seen you and recognizes you for what you are. Simon, hoping to flee from the scene, dashes quickly into different alleyways here and there. Unfortunately, the old man has lived in this town far longer than Simon has. Simon only recently moved to this town as the heat on him got a little too high in his last one, and the old man corners him. Pointing a gnarled finger at Simon, the old man says, "If you're gonna try to kill me, you haunter of the night, you had best make sure it sticks," as the old man pulls from his side a wooden stake. Simon, unfortunately, isn't going to be able to cunning his way out of this, so he's gonna have to fight. And so that is a partial failure. That is fine on ferocity because stats can't go below 1d4. So ferocity stays at 1, but the Simon is not able to get away from the old man or fight off the old man. Simon is instead now even more backed into a corner as the old man seems to be calling more people in to help make sure Simon is captured, possibly revealing the secrets of all vampires. (3 a.m.) 17 and 18. Unfortunately, the people the old man called are a priest and religious followers. Simon has to do something he hates to get out of here, which is giving up some information. Simon reaches in his bag and pulls out books and tomes and says to this priest, "Help me. I was trying to make my way to the church to turn in these items I found, and this old man, delusional, came out of nowhere and started attacking me, accusing me of being a vampire just because I was out in the night." The old man, of course, yells at the priest and his followers, "Don't believe his lies! He tried to drain my blood. He killed me!" And we're going to say, because cunning is described as reflects your cleverness, ability to think quickly and avoid danger, you are deceitful and evasive. We're going to roll this as cunning, as he is trying to make these religious followers believe this old man is crazy, and that Simon was just trying to turn in religious artifacts he found. That is a 3. Therefore, that is a partial success. I get what I want, but it's complicated. I gain a blood token, but the stat decreases. The priest looks between Simon and the old man and has a concerned look on his face. Simon, of course, is doing his best to try to put on this facade and talk about how this old man attacked him. The old man's continuing to insist that Simon's a vampire. Simon eventually wins out in the end, but it has taken up too much precious time, and Simon is already hurting and burning, and he needs to get to his safe house so that he can start being treated. His brain is already going foggy. Unfortunately, Simon no longer has the books with him anymore. Has to turn them over to this clergy, and the clergy usher the old man away. 4 a.m. 1 in 20. I find someone that owes me a debt and is unwilling to pay it. Okay. Simon finds another vampire. This one's name, this vampire that Simon knows quite well, is named Charles Davidson. Simon, upon seeing Charles, waves him down, brings him over, catches his attention, and runs up to him and is like, "Charles, thank God I've found you. I've been having a hell of a night, and I need to get home. Now, I know that I've helped you in the past, and, well, let's be honest, you owe me a debt. I need you to get me the oldest book you have, okay? Just go and grab it for me and bring it back, because I'll need it when I get to where I'm going." Charles scoffs at the notion. "Listen, just because I owe you something doesn't mean you get some of the most precious relics I have for it." I'm going to have Simon roll influence to see if he can tell this man what for. 3. So I'm going to gain a blood and lose an influence. With a partial success and losing influence, Simon's going to say to Charles after he scoffs, "Please, Charles, I'm begging you. Please, I'll owe you a favor instead. Just give me that book. I need it so that when I get to where I'm going, I can pay off the man and be fine, okay? I need a book, okay?" Charles, seeing Simon embarrass himself like this in front of him, takes a little bit of glee in it and says, "Well, if you're gonna fucking debase yourself, if you're gonna be a little bitch about it, sure. But I'll need that back and a second book." Fine, whatever. I need it for now, and then I'll get you it back, and I'll get you another book, whatever." And Charles disappears into the night. Simon knows that if Charles makes a deal, he's good for his word. Unfortunately, now Simon owes Charles a favor, and he definitely doesn't want to owe Charles a favor. So hopefully he can make it through the night and resolve things later. And last but not least, the final hour, 5 a.m. Oh, just so we're aware, I have rolled multiple 3s, multiple 2s, multiple 1s, and a single 4. So hopefully luck goes my way on this one, and I get a 4. 1 and 19. Ooh, another vampire. This one is Adeline Posington. Simon, on the final stretch before getting home, runs into a figure dressed in a long, flowing black dress, skin as white as ivory, lips bright red. Anybody gazing upon her would see that she is a vampire. She is an old vampire, young in appearance, old in time lived. She is powerful and influential, and nobody dares ignore Adeline. Simon is not nobody, and therefore does not ignore Adeline. "Excuse me, Simon, is that you?" Yes, it's me. "Yes, Adeline." "Oh my goodness, you've been badly hurt tonight." "Well, no matter. You'll be fine in a few days. Us vampires, we make it through. But you're just who I wanted to run into." "Why did you want to run into me, Adeline?" "Well, I need something. You see, there's one of the 2 churches in town recently got their hands on some very important texts, and, well, I'm gonna need you to go grab it. Fortunately, they're on their way to the church right now. I'm not particularly stealthy. They'll see me and possibly throw holy water at me. I need you to intercept that group walking to a church. They're walking with like an old man, so maybe you can stop and take the stuff off of them. You know, distract the old man, take care of the old man, do something, take the stuff off the clergy, bring that back to me." Simon puts his head in his hands and says, Sure, Adeline. I'll go and take the long-lost scriptures from the group headed to the other main church in this place, because they somehow ended up with it in the middle of the night and now are delivering it to their safekeeping. I wonder where that came from, how that got out of some other church's crypt suddenly in the middle of the night. Adeline just claps her hands together and says, "Great, wonderful, I'll see you soon." And we're going to roll for, it literally doesn't matter because I have 1 in each stat, but this is a stealth mission. So Simon is going to try to intercept this clergy, kind of spook them a little bit by having things pop out of corners or that kind of stuff. We'll see how it goes. So, I will lose a blood token for that. Unfortunately, these clergy are also prepared. So when Simon tries to spook them the very first time, one of the clergy members throws a vial at him and catches him square in the chest, shattering and getting more holy water on him. Unfortunately, this means that Simon is doing very poorly right now. He's not able to get the books or tomes. He's not able to get anything. He just hopes that Adeline assumes he's dead and he's gonna have to lay low for a while. At the end of the night, he makes it to the old house. And let me roll for the final situation. For the final event, you roll all the d4 you have in your stats. So I have 3d4, and you add the amount of blood you have, which is +2. So this one is a total roll, so 1d4 plus 2, and it'll describe how the night ends for Simon. That is a 3, a 4, and a 1, putting Simon at 8, plus 2 is 10, which means that Simon survived the night, but there's still a problem. Simon has made it through the night successfully. Unfortunately, Charles has failed to do what he needed to. Instead, in front of the door to the old house that Simon lives in with the old man, he finds a note simply saying, "Well, I guess you don't owe me one after all. I owe you 1 old book, signed Charles." unfortunately, that means Simon doesn't have anything to give to the old man, the old scholar. And the scholar tells him, Simon, you return this night with nothing of value. Therefore, I can provide you no services. I am not kicking you out into the daylight, but when night falls, you must be gone and never return. Unfortunately, for Simon, that of course means that he doesn't have a place to live anymore. And Lord knows if he's gonna find someone who can patch him up at some point. But hey, he made it through the night. That's better than some. Well, that was Bloodless. It's an interesting journaling game. Kind of create a story as you go along. You can definitely do longer entries and make it whole scenes and basically whole quests. I wanted to keep it short because we're just doing little snippets here and there. I think it's pretty fun if you want to just do like a light version of 1000-Year Vampire. You know, just something to pass apparently 40 minutes with. That's surprising. Overall, fun system. I'm not sure. I guess it's supposed to be difficult for you to make it through the night because almost every single roll you make is going to drop one of your stats. Unless you get a 4, your stat is dropping. So almost every time you're going to end up at 111 because essentially you only have 3 points. Unless you just like play it that you only use your lowest stat. I think this could benefit from a way to avoid players just using their lowest stat, because in theory, I could have just used ferocity over and over, and even if I failed, it wouldn't have dropped, and then at the end of the night, I would have been able to roll 6d4 to determine my ending. Yeah, I think you'd need a reason to do that sort of thing, because the final table wants 1 through 5, 6 through 10, 11 or higher. And rolling 6d4, you're gonna on average get 15. So like if you just use your worst stat all the time, you're going to more than likely succeed. So if you want to play this for yourself, I'll put a link to the itch.io if there is one in the description. Let me check real quick. Bloodless. Yeah, it's $5. Bloodless by Ennio. Yeah, I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. It's a fun little pastime, but it could use a little bit of touch-ups here and there. In theory, if I was metagaming it, I would just pick my lowest stat every time, but I guess if you're doing a solo journaling game, you shouldn't be metagaming anyways. I would like a reason not to use my lowest stat. There's no punishment for using my lowest stat other than I lose blood tokens, and a D4 is going to be worth more than the +1 to my end score. In fact, the blood tokens, there's basically no reason to use them when rolling, because the idea is once per round you can spend 1 blood token to add an additional 1d4 to your next roll. This represents you using your supernatural abilities to help aid you in a conflict. But why would I spend a blood to add a d4 to my next roll and possibly still lose a blood, basically, unless that the best that can give me is my blood remains the same and my stats don't change, because I'd be spending a blood token to gain a blood token, and then on average it's going to cause you to still lose a stat, and then either your blood goes down by 1 or your blood remains the same rather than gaining blood. There's almost no reason to use blood to roll. So I feel like it could be a little bit cleaner in that regard, I must say. Not my favorite way I've seen this done, but it was fun, and I appreciated going through with it. It allowed for interesting ideas, and it's a fun little time waster. So that's the episode for today. I'm sorry the bartender wasn't here. Like I said, they're on the mend, and they'll be back for an episode soon enough, but I appreciate every one of you. Thank you for listening. Remember to share the podcast wherever, and thank you, and make sure to tip the barmaids.